Good evening and welcome back to Normal Island. It's a Monday show in the depths of December. I'm Cog and I will be your host for this evening. Tonight we'll be looking at Israel and Ireland, Nigel Farage coming after our abortion rights, how the Whatever podcast is manipulating men's views of dating, and Labour deporting more irregular migrants than the Tories did. And in a first for me, I'm honoured to be joined by Big Maj Studios. Maj has been creating YouTube videos for years, and he's even got merch on my store where you can buy t-shirts, hoodies, tote bags, awesome stuff. We love to see a successful leftist creator. How you doing, Maj?
Successful, I don't know about that, but I'll take all of that. I'll take all the credit, yeah.
Successful, good analysis as well. Yeah.
Good, yeah.
No.
Pretty good, I'd say. But I
Yeah.
would say that.
I would.
I appreciate that, man. It's good.
Yeah, it's good stuff. Yes, so don't forget to like and share the live. It helps us out massively and allows us to keep the show going. As usual, Maj and I will be reading through your comments after the third story, so do keep commenting your thoughts as we go through the stories. You know we love hearing from you. It's always the best. So, without any further ado, let's go on to our first story of the night. If you're sick of Israel brutalizing innocent Palestinians, If you're sick of Israel brutalizing innocent Palestinians, maybe you should have a look at what Ireland have been doing, because Ireland have been doing their bit to pressure Israel. And this week, Israel has suspended diplomatic relations with the Republic of Ireland, accusing the pro-Palestine nation of anti-Semitism for daring to condemn the Israeli government's brutal slaughter of the Palestinians. So the BBC reported that Gideon Saar said the Republic of Ireland had crossed every red line. In a statement, he said Israel's ambassador to Dublin had been recalled in the past following what he called Ireland's unilateral decision to recognise a Palestinian state. He added that the decision followed Ireland's announcement of its support for South Africa's legal action against Israel in the International Court of Justice, ICJ, accusing the country of genocide. Mr. Saar said the actions and anti-Semitic rhetoric used by Ireland against Israel are rooted in the delegitimization and demonization of the Jewish state, along with double standards. And the Irish responded to the news with statements of their own. Taoiseach, that's the Irish Deputy Prime Minister, Michael Martin, said there are no plans to close its embassy in Israel. Martin said he had been informed by the government of Israel of its decision to close its embassy in Dublin. He said, I firmly believe in the importance of maintaining diplomatic channels of communication and regret that this decision has been taken. Ireland's position on the conflict in the Middle East has always been guided by the principles of international law and the obligation on all states to adhere to international humanitarian law. He said the continuation of the war in Gaza and the loss of innocent lives is simply unacceptable and contravenes international law. He added it represents the collective punishment of the Palestinian people in Gaza. We need an immediate ceasefire, the release of all hostages, and a surge of humanitarian aid into Gaza. Very difficult to disagree with any of those positions, and there is something to be said, I think, for how well Ireland have played this, refusing to lower themselves to Israel's level and keeping diplomatic relations open and transparent. Israeli opposition leader Yair Lapid criticised the Israeli government as capitulating to anti-Semitism by withdrawing diplomatic relations, saying that they should stand and fight. So, in reality, there's actually very little disagreement inside Israel about Ireland being anti-Semitic for daring to criticise them blowing Palestinian children to pieces. So, Maj, what did you kind of make of this story?
Been one of Palestine's biggest allies, probably the biggest, because the Middle East is kind of a joke when it comes to a lot of the Arab leaders, because a lot of the stuff they did in Palestine they actually did in Ireland first. So the same sort of characters were involved at the time. So in terms of they've had a rocky relationship, especially more recently. In terms of Ireland's been very critical of Israel. I think it's them, Norway, and Spain that have been the most critical, I'd say. Spain, I think, maybe the most because they've called for sanctions on Israel, which I 100% I respect that. But this is what happens, relations break down with nations, closing an embassy or pulling your diplomats out is a big step because it ends kind of normal relations between two different countries. The only step really beyond that is sanctions and then a hot war. So this is a really big step, diplomatically speaking. So, I support the Irish government on this one, especially as they're going through. They would have gone through a transition, I think, slightly because there was an election recently. But I think the two major parties still won. But it does show you the impact that certain countries that remember colonization do remember what's happened. They do remember it well. What's up?
Mm. Yeah, I certainly agree that yeah, the Ireland's like vociferousness on this, and some of the best like pro-Palestinian speeches that I've seen have actually come out of Ireland's parliament. But Ireland's like connection to its colonial history has to be like at the core of any conversation to do with like Ireland and Israel, right? Ireland was actually one of the last countries to put an embassy in Israel in 1996, I think. Like it begrudgingly accepted the state of Israel and what it had done. Um, but I also think there's a big tie between when we're talking about the legitimacy of political violence and comparing the way that the IRA was treated in the sort of 80s, that sort of time, to the way that Hamas and Palestinian resistance groups are treated now. I don't obviously don't agree with all of their tactics, either in the case of the IRA or the Palestinian resistance groups, but there's that acknowledgement there, and there has to be, I think, that acknowledgement that people in a situation where they have been so utterly suppressed by a powerful colonial state, there's going to be violence in that situation, and so there's a certain empathy, I think, between the Irish people and the and the Palestinians. Speaking of which, though, of course, there was the whole situation in Lebanon as well. I'd be interested to know what your thoughts were on the Irish peacekeepers refusing to back down. This was like a month or so ago, but it seems to me connected.
It's because I think their history with colonization is different to a lot of the European countries, because a lot of European countries were colonizers. Like even Portugal, Spain, for example, they were involved. Russia, those sorts of countries were all kind of colonizing powers, whereas Ireland really wasn't. So I think that's what's changed it. So I think with that, they can kind of see the expansion. I think that's what it is. They can see kind of Israel trying to expand even into Syria now. I think those Irish peacekeepers are quite brave, because Israel did take shots at them um, at the time, to try and push them back, because they were filming what was going on. So it's incredibly brave to do that, and they would have known that if anything had happened to them, then it would have been a major diplomatic row at that point. So I think that's one of the reasons they stayed in, because they knew that Israel couldn't do much to them. So but it's incredibly brave, because this Israeli government are, there's no limit to what they would do. Genuinely, like the whole pager incident said it all, really, where they had no idea who they were hitting, but it was just civilians were getting killed. And yeah, it's just the depravity of the Israeli government. I think this is one of the worst that we've seen in terms of governments, I think, worldwide. There's not many worse than them, I'd argue, at this point. So
Yeah,
it's incredibly brave what the Irish have done here, like in terms of trying to take a lead on it as well.
yeah. I mean, what have we got now in terms of expansion? We've got expansion into Syria,
Yep,
expansion into Lebanon, expansion into Palestine, as in Gaza and the West
yep.
Bank. Like, but that's beyond the illegal occupations that they already had across the West Bank and Gaza. Like, just yeah, it's wild to me that more countries aren't taking a stand, and that it's not kind of more obvious to more countries. But it is nice to see Spain, Spain stepping out and stepping in, and of course there's a solidarity between Ireland and South Africa. And South Africa's, of course, the apartheid government in South Africa was supported by Israel, and so there's all sorts of like there's a whole history
Yeah.
there of connection, and I think that played into why the Irish supported the South African case and continue to support it in the ICJ, right?
In terms of Israel calling it anti-Semitic, or Ireland anti-Semitic, like they try to argue sanctions on Israel would be anti-Semitic and stuff like that, and you're just like, there's no like, everything is like at this point, like it doesn't matter what you say. Like that's one of the reasons why the British government didn't do sanctions, especially on the settlers during the last Tory administration, because Israel kept pushing back on them, saying it's anti-Semitic. It's like you're breaking the rules, pal.
Mm.
Like you're essentially getting special treatment for rule breaking. Like that's a kind of racism in itself. So like it was incredibly frustrating to kind of hear former Tory junior ministers talk about it, and even David Cameron saying, oh, I had all the paperwork ready. It's like, but you didn't submit it, pal.
Yeah,
You didn't get it over the line, did you? And just like
yeah,
most things in his life. So I don't, I mean, like there's no excuse for it. Like you had Obama talking about healthcare and stuff and saying, oh, more should have been done. It's like, if only you were in charge and you had a majority, pal. if only. But that's what I mean. Like it always
Yeah.
happens with politicians. Like when they leave office is when they say, "If only like someone had done more." And it's like that was you.
Yeah. Yeah. You were
So
in a position to do something about that. Yeah.
and you blocked it as well. Like if you look at it now, like in terms of blocking the F-35 parts and stuff like that, Starmer could do that. And I heard a lot of the arguments around it. Is people trying to defend him, saying, "Well, it would cause problems in the global market." And he's like, "No, it wouldn't. You just put an export ban on it. It's literally
Yeah.
what everyone else does. You just put an export ban, saying like it can't go to Israel. That's it." So like the arguments people have come up with are ridiculous, I think. But I'm glad, credit to Spain. Very surprisingly, but they do have quite a left wing government, I think.
Mm.
So huge credit goes to them. Norway as well, Ireland, and all the other countries that are kind of trying to push back on this. In terms of countries not really caring about Israel taking more areas, like I mean that's not surprising at all. Like they call it a buffer zone, and it's just like they stole someone's land. That's
Mm.
all it is. If I steal my neighbour's house and call it a buffer zone, it's me stealing my neighbour's house. So I think it's just awful. Like in
Yeah.
terms of expansion.
Yes, the alley between our houses and one of his bins is now it's a
Yeah,
buffer zone. That's just going to stuff my recycling in it. Like it's not how it works.
yeah,
Um,
it's just crazy.
yeah, and like I believe in Syria. I could be wrong on this. So someone please feel free to correct me in the chat. But like I did hear that Israeli tanks were getting within like I think it was like 20 kilometers of Damascus. It's
It
like
was near, yeah.
deep into Syria.
Yeah, they blew up the Syrian Navy docks and things like that as well. Like they blew up their assets and stuff. Try to argue they're Assad's assets. I'm like, I don't think, given where Damascus is, I don't think the Syrian Navy are going to rescue him anytime soon. So it was just a way of weakening Syria even more because it
Hmm.
benefits Israel. Because we don't know a lot about the new people in charge of Syria now. They've gone on a massive rehabilitation cycle in terms of trying to show that they're more kind of Western and pro minorities and stuff like that. But they're on the watch list. I
Mm.
believe they're still on the watch list now, and that's for a reason. Especially given that at the time we were looking for anyone to back. Like what's his name? Ed Miliband got incredible amounts of stick for it, but David Cameron's like, "Oh, we've got 80,000 guys ready to go," and everyone's like, "Who are these 80,000?" And he's like, people in the area, they're about, and you're just like, yeah, Islamists, like, be honest, like they're radicals.
Mm.
So yeah, like it's a complete mess in the Middle East. It's getting progressively worse. Um, I think especially with Donald Trump coming in, I think it's gonna, they're gonna be able to hold on to the land. Like, let's not forget, Israel does illegally occupy the Golan Heights as well. Like,
Yes.
so they've just expanded their already illegal settlements.
Yeah. Yes. And there is a degree to which Assad, of course, was very much he'd normalized relations with Israel. He'd like become compliant with Israel, and I think there is a bit of a panic among the Israelis. They see it as an opportunity, but I think also there is a bit of a panic that they don't know what's on their on their I say on their doorstep, as
Mm.
though they have to worry about as though the most advanced military in the region has to worry about military threats from Syria. Like it doesn't, but yeah, yeah, and yeah, I think that's I think it's just something that's got to be kind of taken into account, but also like yeah, I don't think they've got too much to worry about on that front, but it probably is what they're thinking. Yeah, I don't. I think in this situation, my full solidarity is really with the Palestinians and with Ireland right now. I'm sure you feel the same, but we should
Yeah.
probably go on to our next story. So, in the UK, we have watched in horror as women's rights in the USA have rolled back decades with new restrictive anti-abortion legislation. Already, we've seen the deaths of women like Amber Thurman, Candy Miller, and Neva Crane. Even when there are exceptions for cases where the mother's life is in danger, doctors are slowed by fear of losing their medical license or being accused of murder. It's our position here at Turn Left that a woman, or any other person for that matter, should always have a right to free themselves of a medical violation of their bodily autonomy. There's no exception to that rule. Even if you might have to follow procedures to claim that right, certain procedures might be placed in. That's absolutely fine. Barriers, though, should never be put in the way of you reclaiming your bodily autonomy, and people should help you to reclaim your bodily autonomy. That's why we were so alarmed by news that Nigel Farage wants to have a debate about rolling back abortion rights here in the UK. As the Byline Times reported, Nigel Farage is working with an extreme religious anti-abortion campaign group against a supposed tsunami of censorship in Britain as he backs calls for a debate on restricting abortion rights in the UK. Farage was quoted in a statement from the Alliance Defending Freedom, that's ADF, which campaigns to outlaw abortion, as saying that the crackdown on free expression within the UK is becoming very sinister. Our police and government now withhold vital public information, and we get censored simply for demanding the truth. I will continue to fight this. Farage's statement comes as he suggests that MPs should debate rolling back the 24-week abortion limit. This is a quote, is 24 weeks right for abortion given that we now save babies at 22, he told a press conference in London on Thursday. That to me would be worthy of a debate in Parliament. We hope it goes without saying that Nigel Farage is talking out of his backside. The age of fetal viability, according to the NHS, which is the age at which a fetus has a more than 50% chance of surviving outside of the womb, is still 24 weeks. NHS perinatal guidelines say that babies born between 22 and 24 weeks, so the period that he's talking about, are high risk, and as such, for fetuses/babies at extremely high risk, palliative, comfort-focused care would be the usual management. For fetuses/babies at high risk of poor outcome, the decision to provide either active, that's survival-focused management, or palliative care should be based primarily on the wishes of the parents. In other words, the decision of the parents is the focus, since the chances of survival outside the womb are so low. Far from being an inconsistency, the current guidelines are perfectly in line with allowing abortion up to 24 weeks. 94% of abortions are performed at or before the first 12 weeks, according to YouGov data from 2022. And to be clear, the Alliance Defending Freedom doesn't believe that abortion for women is okay at 21 weeks, but not at 22 weeks, right? The ADF wants to ban abortion altogether, and Nigel Farage is attempting to find a crack in the armour of women's rights in the UK that they can exploit. It's not about fetal viability. It's about putting women's right to choose back on the table as an issue so that they can start to take that right away. The reason that Conservatives want to restrict abortion is that they want to restrict women's political and social autonomy by pushing them back into the home. Because think about it from the perspective of your average family. If a woman gets pregnant and isn't allowed an abortion, she's forced to take time off work, and then it makes financial sense for her to have time off whenever childcare is needed. It subtly pushes women back into the home, and not only does it push us closer to a reversion to these 1950s dynamics, but it also creates more poverty and desperation, which the rich can exploit to get good, compliant, hungry workers. It's a world we can't go back to, and one we're trying to avoid going back to. So the big question now, Maj, is do you think that the anti-abortion crowd in the UK has legs? What do you think is the best way to fight them and make sure that we protect women's rights going forward?
I don't really think it has legs. Not at the moment. I think it's not a mainstream issue. Most people in the UK focus more on the NHS, the economy, and immigration. Unfortunately, for the last one, so I just don't think it's going to get legs. A lot of the I think there are a lot of female hosts on news organisations, or they'll push back on it quite aggressively as well. So I don't think it's going to get much traction in Sky, BBC, that kind of stuff, especially Sky, I think. So I don't think it would. America, I think, thing is because they're much more religious in the South, and their politics is more embedded in religion. I think that's where the danger is, especially because the way their court system is built as well, and the way their kind of legislation is. You would have to change it in Parliament. It'd have to go through the Lords. It'd be quite difficult. So I think for now, at least, this is the next kind of stage of the culture war, because Farage doesn't want to talk about Brexit anymore. He doesn't want to talk about certain other topics, so he's moved on to abortion. And the other thing is, it pushes the kind of Overton window in the US as well, I think. If they can point at us and say, "Oh, look, they're also, looking to limit abortion. Maybe we should keep doing it as well." So I think that's the main reason they're doing it. It's being funded by a big organization as well. I think they're putting a lot of money into Farage to push this kind of agenda. So it's one of them things that I don't think it's got a lot of legs at the moment. You never know with this kind of stuff, but I think you're right in terms of it's there to control women, especially when we don't have adequate childcare in this country. Along with the other things, you would need to increase birth rate. There's a reason why birth rate is falling, and it's for a multitude of reasons. And so getting rid of abortion, like it just makes things more dangerous. And we've gone through it in different countries. It just makes abortions more accessible to rich people, and it just makes it more dangerous because if women don't want to have a child, they'll find a way of trying to get rid of it. So it's a really stupid idea. But this is what he has now. What else is he going to run on? That's the thing. Like, what else is he going to push? And it's just easy money. Like, these groups will fund him, and that's it. Like, he gets easy paychecks and stuff he can rant about on GB News and stuff.
Yeah, yeah. What's the phrase? You can never abolish abortion. You can only abolish safe abortions. Right. That's
Yeah.
the phrase that comes to mind. And of course, you've got the case of like Savita Halapanava, the woman who died in 2000, and I want to say it was 2012. It might be 2013. In Ireland, because her pregnancy, there was a heartbeat law in Ireland at the time. It eventually led to Ireland repealing that heartbeat law. Um, and I think it was the Eighth Amendment. Off the top of my head, I can't remember. But Savita's death was so significant because she went to the doctor before her pregnancy went septic and asked for an abortion, and the doctors delayed because, of course, they're worried about their medical license. They're worried about being charged with something akin to murder. They have every reason to hold back and to be nervous. And in Savita's case, like, that cost her life. There's a real very real human cost to this stuff. And yeah, I'm really glad you you bring it up. I guess the thing to consider, though, is I do take your point about how it's a lot of the media has no time for this stuff at the moment, right? A lot of our mainstream media, the BBC, Sky News. However, I did see that GB News are unfortunately outpacing Sky News in some areas of broadcast right now. Do you think that could be a worry? Because, of course, does Nigel Farage still have a show on? Or am I misremembering on?
I don't think he does anymore.
Okay. Yes.
I think it's been replaced by Mog, I think, because there's parliamentary rules around having shows. I think there's weird stuff around it. Not that they care, anyways, but I think there are certain rules against that kind of stuff. I think, yeah, with GB News getting more traction, I think it'll be with certain demographics, it'll be like older people. And I think I think if they go anti-abortion, I think that'll turn off younger voters. I think, especially women. But GB News, Reform is doing well with, I think, younger males. I think white males predominantly. Now I think they're kind of picking up that demographic a lot more, which is very concerning.
Mhm.
That is the most concerning thing. But I think for now, at least, I think things like abortion rights are relatively safe. I think in the next election, Reform will probably do a lot better and kind of pick away at Labour's heartlands a bit more, and that's where I think the concern would set in. But I don't think it will be one of their flagship policies. I think their main policies will be their kind of fix for the NHS, which wouldn't work, some stuff on the economy, which definitely won't work, and just an immigration policy that's be like one in, one out, or something like that. So I don't think they'll push abortion in their top five policies.
Yeah, I think it would lose them popularity. I think a bit like the net zero stuff with Reform UK and net zero. It's not a very popular thing to be like against net zero at the moment. They're trying because, of course, they have a certain line to push because they get they allegedly get paid by certain people, maybe possibly from the oil industry. Who knows? Just possibly. I'm just saying it's a possibility to push a certain agenda about net zero and whether decarbonisation is a good thing or a bad thing. But of course, they can only push that so far because public opinion is so, from what I've seen, firmly on the side of environmentalists. And
It depends on like where voters are based and like certain types of voters as well. I think they'll keep making the argument that our bills are going up because of net zero, and I think they
mm,
managed to make that argument okay most of the time. So, because I think there are green levies and stuff like that. So I think it's not the hardest argument in the world to make, although they're not the smartest people in the world. So who knows?
yeah,
But I think when it comes to net zero, it makes sense as a policy. It's just about getting there. That's the problem. But I think they have so many different cultural aspects to fight. I don't think abortion will be one of their main policies, in my opinion.
mm,
For now at least.
yes,
Especially when like it's just such a dumb idea, like on so many levels. Like, you're going to force people to have kids they don't want to have. Childcare in this country is non-existent. You can barely get a flat, forget a house. And you're just going to have kids that are going to be hated by their parents. I think, like, just it's going to be a disaster.
Yeah. Yes. And I suppose you could, in a perfect world, or not a perfect world, but a world where you had to react to that. You could invest in social services and make sure that those kids are adopted and everything, and get proper support, proper welfare. But of course, well, there's this ideology in this country of never spending a penny more than you have to, and running the entire UK economy on a shoestring budget.
Yeah.
Everything's underfunded, everything's understaffed. It's a
Well,
crate. Like, I'm on a crusade against understaffing right now, and efficiency.
foster care is like that anyway. So a lot of
Mm.
kids leaving homes and things like that. It's incredibly dangerous for those kids in care. So, this could be, it just adds to a problem we already have. And you're right, we do nickel and dime everything. It's always the bottom bidder that gets it. And it's just like, I can't remember if I covered it on stream or if I was discussing with someone, like, it's about HS2, and they're like, how come we can't get like good transport in this country? It's because they nickel and dime everything, and they're always like discussing, oh, can we do this? Can we do that? And it's just like, just get it done, man. Just, if you have a plan and you've thought it out properly, just get it done. It's ridiculous.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. I think for too long we've kind of like let the state be something that sits back and doesn't get involved in the economy, as though the state isn't one of the most powerful assets that we have. And I personally think it's ridiculous.
It's the Watchman system of, oh, we'll let private industry and stuff deal with it, and then we'll make sure they don't break the rules, and then they consistently break the rules, and then no one does anything because councils and stuff have no money. Like, the first thing the councils cut was things like childcare because children don't vote, and it's like, that's so, like, it's just so dystopian when you look at it. Like, when you look at this, the
Mm.
reason why we have so many kind of slumlords in England is because the councils are meant to enforce the rules, but the councils have no money. So what they do is they cut back on that. So no matter how many times you complain to them, they don't enforce anything. And that's the same thing with foster care. Same thing with lots of things. Like, they cut back everything, and they make it so it's like people bidding each other against each other, privatization and things like that. And then it's just the lowest bidder, or who can get it done. And it's just
Yeah,
there's no care for like the public or the end user at that point. It's just squeeze it for as much money as you can make.
yeah, yes, and yeah, it's all about extracting wealth from the state for private companies, rather than
Yeah.
the actual efficiency of the state and its ability to like serve as something that's not only useful to like us wishy-washy lefties, who believe that people should have like basic human accommodation and basic food, housing, energy. Like, it's not just for us, but also like for the capitalists. Like, the lack of investment has led to a situation where the consumer just has no power in our economy anymore. So whenever any business is open, I'm sure you've noticed this on your
Yeah.
high street as well, businesses open and then just close down again because no one can afford to buy the shit they're
Yeah,
producing.
it's just, if you have only money for basic necessities and you struggle at that, what makes you think you can buy anything good or go on experiences and stuff? And that's the stuff that causes a recession, where you don't have any disposable income. Like, there's a reason why, like, October, the economy shrunk again. There is
Yeah,
a reason for that. People are broke. Like, there's no money in this country. It's all being siphoned out. So how do you expect people to spend in the economy? They keep
yeah,
saying spend, 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 and it's like, no, bro, I can barely save.
100%. And it always amazes me because, of course, in America, the thing is like big government. You say to people, or American conservatives say that, oh well, we don't want the big government interfering with our rights, and it's like, well, in a lot of what they mean is they want to keep all the worst parts of the state, right? They want to keep the military and the police, and they want to keep restrictions on women's healthcare and abortion rights. They want to ban books. Like, all of the worst, most authoritarian parts of living in a state are the things they want to keep, and they want to get rid of welfare and investment in the economy. Utterly wild to me. Just connecting it back to abortion, that's not their red line. That's not the thing that they think, oh, well, big government, that means obviously making sure that women have bodily autonomy for the rights of everybody, you know?
Yeah, the irony is they don't realize big government has given them their rights. Like, have you ever seen Sam Cedar versus Libertarians? Right, the funniest stuff you'll ever see on any kind of news show, right? Because big government is stopping me running into your house with my AK and saying, "Get out of my house." That's what
Literally.
the government does. Yeah, because the police will turn up, and I have no legal right. If there's no government, I can say, "Look, get out of my house," or "You're getting hard scope with a sniper." That's it. Like it's ridiculous, honestly. Like people don't get like you need government. Like you genuinely need big government to look after you, because there's nothing stopping the rich people from just taking your assets. Genuinely nothing.
Yeah, well, that's just it. Like these right-wing libertarians, it's not that they believe in liberty, they believe in another person's right to oppress you because they happen to own more capital than you do,
Yeah.
rather than happen to be elected as head of a state, right? That's the distinction. I'm glad somebody else watches those Sam Cedar versus Libertarian playlists. They're
I
good.
miss them calling in, because I tell you what, it's like, "Oh, have you ever run a McDonald's?" It's like, "Have you?" And it's like,
Yeah. It's so good.
the best genre on the internet, honestly.
Yes, absolutely. But we should move on to from libertarians and abortion rights to our next story. The Whatever Pod is an American dating and relationships podcast where the right-wing host, Brian Atlas, talks to drunk women and tries to trick them into saying stupid things for social media clips. And oh boy, can you see how annoyed he gets when the women don't agree with him.
There's a basement dwelling, virgin, neck beard having, morbidly obese, Cheeto dust having. He lives in his mother's basement. Do you think this guy is gonna get a Victoria's Secret model?
Does he have a personality too?
I was just about to say that.
I don't care how fucking good his personality is. And most of you would immediately disqualify him on the basis of his looks and standing in life alone, right? Can you guys be good faith? Like, oh yeah, there's, you guys always want to argue like the outlier. You always want to argue just in general. You think most women want to date the morbidly obese, Cheeto dust having, virgin neck beard, living with his parents, playing video games all day, smoking weed? The answer is no.
No.
Just sometimes you guys can just grant an argument and be like, instead of just me, oh, well, there's some girl out there who's a Victoria's Secret model that would him, you could just say no. There's some girl out there.
No, if he has motivation and let's say he's in his mom's basement all the time because he's hustling online and doing like ball shit, then I don't know.
That's it, Brian. Ask women what they want and then get like very triggered when they disagree. The person that he's describing there, yeah, there's like habits that are not great, like the basement dwelling or living with your parents or eating Cheetos for some reason. That's the I don't know. It's like we're getting a view into his mind, and the people who really annoy him apparently are from the second Toy Story. I don't know. Why bother listening to women or even paying them lots of money to do appearances on your show, mate, when you've already decided that you know what women want in every case? But Brian's business model, of course, isn't built on conveying truths to men about women having complex and nuanced views on attraction. Instead, the business works on getting the women drunk, making them answer ridiculous questions, and then clipping those answers out of context to make women seem simple and stupid. To see an example of this, we can actually look at a guest named Christina.
Thinking about the average man can't just hook up with a girl like that.
I
They
think there's
can't,
truth
dude.
to that. I think you have a point there.
I think it depends on how charismatic they are.
The
Because
average
if you're
man
funny
is not
and you're cool and you're
what
confident,
what percentage of men are charismatic and cool?
Well, then they should step that up.
yeah, exactly. You're like, where's your personality, man? Like, come on.
Well, that's very convenient for women to say. I want a guy who's funny, who's charismatic, who's confident, all this shit.
But doesn't
Men
a
don't
woman-
care about that shit in
What?
women. You just need
What
to
kind
be
of dumb men
pretty.
are you talking about?
Most of them.
Men don't care about
There are
that
so
stuff.
many hot chicks in the world. Like, you want to
What-
have more
are-
substance than that.
I mean, we could go around the table if you want to rate yourselves from 1 to 10.
That's awful.
Wait, so just curious, like, why didn't you like the rating question, Christina?
Oh, because I think it's really superficial. It's just the rating question doesn't make sense to me. I don't rate unless I start to get to know someone.
Can I ask you a question? Would you date a guy that's shorter than you?
Absolutely not. I used to, but not anymore.
What's your like height requirement?
At least 6'2".
At least 6'2".
Yeah.
How tall are you?
5'5".
5'5".
Yeah.
So 6'2".
Well, 5'6", 5'5".
6'2" bare minimum.
Yeah, I just like tall dudes.
Okay.
That's a
And you said
thing.
you're 5'5", so that's like 7-8 inches difference.
Yeah.
Okay. I see.
I like them to be healthy and agile as well. both mentally and physically. Okay. And I'm like that now because men are so superficial and they're very particular about what they like, and I'm very honest about that too. So
now I feel like Christina is actually being pretty clear there, despite possibly being intoxicated like a lot of the women on that podcast. And it's really interesting in the earlier clips to watch her like destroying him. Let's be honest, he didn't know what to say. She says an average guy can be attractive based on his personality, his vibe, and women will find that attractive. She says it's superficial to rate somebody on a scale of like 1 to 10 instead of viewing attraction as subjective and not just about physical qualities. And she saw men having superficial standards for women like her, maybe not viewing them as a complete person, in my opinion. And she said, hey, I'm going to be superficial in response and say, yeah, I'm only going to date guys over 6'2". If guys are going to be superficial, I think I should be too. Right, that all makes sense to me. But here is the clip that the Whatever podcast uploaded of those moments to TikTok.
Men are so superficial.
Would you date a guy that's shorter than you?
Absolutely not. I'd at least 6'2".
At least 6'2".
Yeah.
How tall are you?
5'5".
5'5".
Yeah.
So 6'2".
Well, 5'5".
6'2" bare minimum.
Yeah, I just like tall dudes.
Do you notice how they clipped it to make it look like she said that men are superficial first, when actually she'd said that afterwards, like she just said it unprompted, like he hadn't just asked her to rate looks on a simple scale, when actually she was rejecting superficiality and only being superficial about height because she felt that men were being superficial about her. Her nuanced views about humor being attractive and getting to know someone rather than reducing them to a number based on physical appearance is gone. It's all replaced with 15 seconds of drunk, edited footage designed to make teenage boys think women like Christina are shallow or stupid. And look, I don't meet her height requirements. I don't give a fuck. Like, I don't care. I think it's silly to be like, concerned in this way about her height requirements, especially when she went out of her way beforehand to be clear that guys can be attractive based on all sorts of traits that go far beyond the physical, right? And I think people being insecure about that, it would be silly anyway. But of course, the Whatever podcast aren't giving you that chance to be nuanced about it. They aren't giving you that chance to go, oh, well, she's got a more nuanced view on it, because they're manipulating and only showing you those 15 seconds. So, Madge, what do you think of the business strategy of these podcasts and how they clip footage of women to manipulate young men like this?
So it's just rage bait, and like it's just to say like, oh, he owned this girl, because there's the idea of the modern woman who's someone who's like dates around, doesn't really cheats on their man or whatever, and goes out clubbing and things like that. There's that big agenda being pushed. I don't really watch this guy that much. I watch Fresh and Fit when he comes on my timeline because I know it's going to be hilarious, whatever's going on. It's the same principle, really. Yeah. So I think they just argue, like, it's just a really easy model of trying to use kind of dodgy arguments against people who aren't really used to arguing that much. It's kind of like what Ben Shapiro did when he went to like American kind of colleges and just debated people. It's like, why don't you debate an academic, pal, someone who actually knows what they're talking about, a graduate? And it's the same principle, really. Like, that's what these guys do. Like, and so I don't think there's anything wrong with having like criteria you set. Like, you do limit yourself in terms of how many dudes are 6'2" and have charisma and all that kind of stuff. But there's nothing wrong with that. Like, that's up to you as a person. Like, you choose who you want to date at the end of the day. But that edit was gnarly because you can see what they were trying to do. But it's trying to get people to watch the full clips, because that's what all these that's what shorts are designed to do, is to design you to try and watch the full thing. So then they get more ad revenue out of it. But I think with that dude, he was talking about how like men don't want someone who's like a woman who's like charismatic. Like what these dudes kind of push is they want like boring kind of submissive women who just do as they say. That's what they kind of push. Like, that's what I noticed when I watched some of the other Manosphere stuff as well. But it's like, okay, that's what you want, but it's like pushing that on to say women should be like this or you should look for a woman like this is just ridiculous. So I think with these guys, like, it's designed to get kind of younger dudes to kind of fall in line with them, and then they sell like dating courses and stuff like that. That's the other thing they push. And I don't know much about this guy, but like Fresh and Fit, they were saying like, yeah, they basically like they're not great with talking to women. So and and that's the thing. But it's all the money spin. So you create all of this rage bait, you do all of this stuff, right? You get money via the podcast, you get money via super chats, but then you also sell courses on top of it. And it's just an endless money cycle. That's all it is. Because they get people who are probably not her, but some people who are superficial. They'll say like, "I want to date a guy who makes like 100K or whatever," and there'll be a lot of younger dudes watching that. It's like, look, I bet I barely make half of that. Like, I haven't got a chance. But it's like, maybe not with these people or the image that they put out, but like, yeah, if you're a decent person who's like funny, I'm the wrong person for this, but who's got some charisma and like personality, like you probably do have a shot with some of the people, like the women that you do meet in life, as long as you're not like really obvious about it.
Yeah. Also, I think that first of all, those women are few and far between, right? That they have to go out of their way to manipulate the footage of those women to remove all of the nuance. The women who are actually like genuinely quite shallow, don't like. There's no reason why young men should aspire to waste their time with somebody like that anyway. And I'd say the same to young women. Like, don't waste your time with somebody who doesn't treat you right. That's just good advice generally. Who sees you for just superficial elements, who's after your money or your looks or anything like that. Of course, you can be attractive to people. That's absolutely fine. And you can be attracted to somebody physically. That's absolutely fine. But of course, they have a problem with that when women are attracted to people physically, because women are to be are people that things happen to, right? Women don't have agency to these people. By the way, is the Fresh and Fit podcast? I don't know. Is the Fresh and Fit podcast, when they do an episode, how long is it? Because
they're quite long. They're like 4 hours. Because I think they give them more alcohol and things like that, and they need more clips to go viral and things like that. So I think that's what they want, is someone who's like quiet and just stays at home, and like if the dude sleeps around, then they don't have an issue with it. Like, I think that's what they want, really. And so like, yeah, like they have the most incredibly just pedantic arguments where the guy was like, well, men think like this, and the lady will push back and say, well, not all men do. It's like, well, when I say that, I don't mean all of them, I mean like 51%. But it's like, just say that, and just say, I think most. Like, and then he talks about Pew Research, and some of the one I was watching, the lady was trying to throw back terms at him like that's a hollow argument, as a straw man and stuff, and it's just like they just bring on people who are just not good at debating. That's all it is. And they use like really false equivalencies in terms of their arguments, to say like why certain things are the same when they're really not. Like, I think with this stuff, it's like, one of my cousins, he was watching Andrew Tate and saying how much of a great guy he is. And I was like, look, man, and my sister kind of tried to pat his head off. And I was like, look, said, look, this way he's not a good guy. This advice is not good. So like, that's why. But the thing is, like, these people, they do look successful. Like, he's got a nice podcast studio. He's got like, 5 women there, like on this debate panel. Like, he looks like he's a success. So yeah, like that's what people want to see. Like, they don't want to listen to people who look like losers. So it's like Jimmy the Giant. He did a thing where he was talking about like the left does have an image problem, and he's right. And so these people, because they've got money, especially, they can kind of project success. Like, like when that dude was talking, like, I think he's just a guy who, yeah, he looks like he's in okay shape and things like that. Maybe he's had like women reject him, and so I think they turn out like that. Or maybe it's just a grift. There was a dude who does a podcast. He talks about how why you shouldn't date a single mum because they made a bad decision. That's why they end up a kid on their own, right? And this guy, he literally dated a person who was a single mum, and then his argument was, well, I have a kid, so I want someone who also has a kid because they understand motherhood. And it's like, but you're literally telling your audience not to do that. Like, nowhere in your argument did you say, oh yeah, don't date a single mum unless you're a single dad. Like, nowhere did you add this caveat. It was only when you got exposed you added it. And it makes sense to say this kind of stuff, I guess, to an extent. Not really, but like, that's your opinion. Like, if you're a single dude without a child, right, don't date someone who has a child. That's your opinion. That's fine. Whatever. Like, but if you're telling people that, and then you also date a single mom, and it's just like, where's all this nuance now? Like, how come suddenly there's caveats to this, or how come it's when you do it, it's okay? Do you know what I mean? Like, it's just silly. That's what I mean. So with these guys, like, it's just bad arguments, rage bait, badly edited clips like you saw where it was designed to push a certain agenda against this lady, and then they try and push you into their longer stuff where you become a subscriber, and then they push courses on you. It's ranked as the 51st in the US and 82nd in the UK for society and culture relation. I mean, yeah, that's not great, but with that kind of stuff, again, like it's the stuff, like some of the podcasts that are like the top, like I've looked at the top UK political podcasts, right, and they're pretty washed, to be honest with you, so I wouldn't be that nervous about it. It's just you got to be able to engage with people. That's some of the things I realized, like doing this stuff as well. You have to be open to engage with people and talk about why some of their ideas are like misunderstood or misconstrued. If you can do that without being so adversarial, it does work. If you just go out and just call people idiots or whatever, which is something I also enjoy doing, it doesn't really work. So sometimes you just got to say to people, like, you're not the clown, you're the entire circus. But like I keep that one like for special people.
It is something that I keep repeating, and the audience is probably sick of hearing me saying it, but it really is about vibe rather than substance, right? They see the image, like a lot of these young men see the image, the false image, because it's hidden behind hours of talking about other things. It's hidden behind alcohol. It's hidden behind the fact that he's in control of the microphones. It's hidden behind the fact that he's like paying these women to come and do these. So they're not just volunteering to come along. He's not just really popular with the women. They're being paid. They're being paid to do appearances on his podcast. They're drunk. They're being clipped out of context. But the presentation that these boys get presents a certain vibe that doesn't have to be backed up with much substance in order to be quite convincing. But it's about getting them to dig their spade into the dirt, right? It's getting them digging the hole, because once they've started digging the hole, there's no telling them that there isn't buried treasure at the bottom of that hole, because they bought into it. And once they bought into it, it is really hard to drag them out. One of the best ways, in my opinion, as you put it, is mockery. Mockery is a really powerful tool, and just like not taking these people too seriously, not trying to debunk all their arguments, because that's not really the point, but instead just pointing at them and laughing and going, these guys are ridiculous, because they are at the end of the day. Yeah. We should probably go on to the next story. But before we do go on to our fourth, and that'll be our final story, we are going to read and react to some of your comments. Firstly, though, I want to remind you that we are all still volunteers at Turn Left, and we're doing our best to produce content around our paid work. If we want to become a fully fledged media organisation, we need your help. Please like and share our content and make us out and help us out financially by going to turnleftmedia.co.uk/support, where you can make a one-off donation or give us a small donation each month to keep us going. We are now also on Blue Sky, the fastest growing social media alternative to Twitter, so do go and check our work out there. I said we need to make out. I was obviously, my mind was still in the dating podcasts mode. Sorry about that. But let's have a look at some of the comments that we've got, and me and Matt can just sort of casually react to some of them. So what have we got? I'm going to have to look this way. So Zeke says, I always see Ireland speakers hitting the mark on YouTube. It's always so satisfying. Yeah, I've seen those clips as well. I don't know about you, Marja.
I've not seen a ton to it. I need to, like I said, I don't watch a lot of other stuff. I need to try and make time for it, but it's, I work full time, bro. I'll be honest. So by the time I get home and get my own content done, it's like, yeah, I'm done.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. Simon Lee says that unilateral decision by Ireland was actually a joint decision announced publicly together with Spain and Norway. Yep. Yeah. Yes. It's nice to see Ireland, Spain, and Norway like leading the four, though. Jay says the 1970 United Nations General Assembly Resolution 2625 explicitly endorsed a right to resist subjugation of peoples to alien subjugation, domination, and exploitation. I'm not qualified enough to be able to comment on that.
No, if only we had a human rights lawyer in charge of the country, they could have explained that to us.
Yeah, that would have been really useful. Be handy if he was a toolmaker as well. Could have made the tools.
Oh, yeah.
His father was a toolmaker.
Could have healed the nation. His mum was a nurse.
Yeah, true. That was much better than the toolmaker thing. Damn it. Wish I thought of that. So Becca says, as a mother of two, I absolutely support the right to choose. I was shouting out a fella outside the healthcare centre for Lent. Pregnancy and childbirth must be consensual. I like shouting at an anti-abortionist for Lent. It's good stuff. All right. Edward Sexby says, look at how attitudes to trans people have changed in 2018. The right will make it an issue, and it'll be all over public discourse like a rash. I'd say there's a danger. I'd say they already had a bit of an in with trans people though, because there was a lot of. I feel like there's a lot of transphobia that originated in Britain. I don't know if Marge has the same sort of take as me on
I
that.
think the problem is sports. I think therein is sports. Regards to like men transitioning to become women and competing in women's sports. That's where the main problem I think is, and that's where I think you can have reasonable discussion on it. I think the other stuff with the bathrooms, it doesn't make much sense. That sports is the only arena I think they have like you could make an argument for it.
Of course, if you understand the restrictions or like hormone restrictions and the way that hormone restrictions work, there's studies from the Journal of Sports Medicine in 2017 which show that there's like a level playing field. Like once you account for the hormone requirements, trans athletes like don't have an advantage, either trans men or trans women, or a disadvantage. They pale out even. But I'm not arguing with you, Madge. I do take the point that like on that surface level, if you don't have that context, and of course most people don't, then you're going to assume, oh well, they're just sort of like letting people who say, oh, I identify as a woman, a man who chooses to identify as a woman compete in women's sport, but it's just not the case at all, and always worth kind of
saying it's a skill issue potentially.
Skill issue, yeah.
Skill issue.
So Jay says it's incredible to think that Farage's entire political career is entirely manufactured by US money and the BBC promotion that began in 2010. It's not inaccurate.
Yeah, I think it's the UKIP stuff that really helped him, and the fact he got a season pass on Question Time.
Yeah. Oh my God, is he the most common guest? I could be wrong on
potentially.
That. Yeah.
I think he did tell them that he can appear anytime, and it's probably one of the reasons why he got divorced.
Yeah. So Leon says, imagine they somehow managed to ban abortion in Britain. Scotland would not be affected, as that would be a devolved area, and women only had Scotland and Ireland as their only options for healthcare. That is a really interesting legal point. I really like that.
In Northern Ireland, I think they had issues with abortion as well up until a few years ago. So, because that's a devolved area, so that would make sense. Like Scotland would probably be the place to go to.
Yeah. Les Watts says, well, you see, the capitalist crisis of 2008 was caused by too many libraries in Wolverhampton, obviously.
Damn, Wolverhampton really letting the side down.
True. Jim Speak says, yeah, well, my mum doesn't even have a basement, so there.
Easy one.
Cool. And this is the last comment we're going to be taking. So from Anne Hayfield, if men have good communication skills, they can get sex. Yeah. I guess. And I think communication is one of the things that I think does, and like men often don't take this into account, but we really appreciate good communication skills from women as well. We just don't think of it that way. I can't speak for Marge, but personally, I'm like, actually, communication probably is one of the things that that I find most, not even like most attractive necessarily, but it puts me at ease, and therefore I'm likely to have a longer relationship with this person if they can communicate well. I don't know.
It's a functional skill, and you can't really you can't really interact with someone if they have no communication skills.
Yes. Luckily, I don't have any communication skills, but I do have a teleprompter. And with that, on to our final story of the evening. Despite everyone on the left shouting from the rooftops that your anti-reform strategy can't be saying that reform is right about everything, Keir Starmer has insisted on tough borders rhetoric. And this week, Home Secretary Yvette Cooper announced that they'd managed even more deportations than the Conservatives had managed in their last period in government, as The Guardian reported. The government has announced that it has deported almost 13,500 people since coming to power, something ministers say proves their tough approach towards migrants, but which human rights campaigners have warned could put lives at risk. The government says it is on track to deliver the highest number of returns for 5 years, and includes the 4 biggest return flights ever. Yes, we are being tough on immigration, laying the groundwork for reform, and the Tories to blame everything on immigration at the next election, which is great, love that. But there's another side to it too. There's a real human cost to these policies that affects the lives of refugees in the here and now. The Guardian report went on to say, Emma Ginn director of the charity Medical Justice, which works to support the health of immigration detainees facing removal from the UK, said, "The new data being celebrated by the government includes real people who have been unable to access legal representation and unable to access the medical and expert evidence needed to properly present their case, meaning some may face real risk on forced return to their country. Our volunteer doctors have visited some of them and documented their physical and psychological scars of torture, as well as deterioration due to the notoriously dangerous UK immigration detention centres. Many have been forcibly separated from their families, their friends, and their community. Access to legal representation and medical care should be a basic right for everyone, and we shouldn't be failing refugees at a time of extreme instability in the Middle East that we've already been talking about, with Western bombs falling on homes across the region." So, Marge, I'm sure you've got a lot to say about this. How are you feeling about Labour's approach to immigration in general and the deportation increases more particularly?
Well, it drives me nuts because if you look at what the stuff they've been saying, like apparently Angela Eagle said Labour aren't going to look at safe points of entry. So you're like, okay, so you're going to keep the channel crossings. They're like, oh, we're dealing with the gangs. It's like, there'll always be new gangs. And the best person to listen to on this stuff is Zoe Gardner. By far, probably the best person in the UK who's on top of this stuff most of the time. So genuinely worth following her on Twitter and just listen to what she has to say. But in terms of like the rhetoric is quite very conservative, very Reform UK. You know, the fact they're talking about record deportations, I think that's just the fact of them processing more claims. So of course you're going to get more kind of rejections because they're actually doing what the government is meant to be doing, which is processing them. The thing that frustrates me most is about the safe points of entry, because they could easily resolve this issue if they either set up a processing centre in France, which some people are against, which is fine, or letting them come to the UK via safe channels and processing their claims. That's the best way to do it. Like, there's a reason why there aren't, I don't think any Ukrainian refugees on these boats, is because they can get here via plane because they can apply online. It just makes sense. And the thing that strengthens these people smugglers the most is the fact that they're the only option for people. It's the same thing with drug dealers as well. They're the only option for people to buy this stuff, and so it empowers them. That's why war on drugs doesn't work. And what we've seen over the last since 2010, or since kind of the real Middle East crisis that we've seen, is kind of a war on refugees, I'd argue. You know, people being drowned in the kind of oceans, the waterways around Europe, and instead of processing people's claims like we should have done, and Europe really working together to say, like, can you take this many, or, you know, we'll fund you and you can take this many refugees or whatever. It's been a case of, we're not going to deal with it. That's your problem. You know, that's why Greece and Italy have had so many issues over, you know, the last decades. That's where the refugee crisis is coming from. Even Poland now, they have so many Ukrainian refugees there. It has been a struggle for them. So it makes sense, you know, if Europe actually worked together properly, it wouldn't be in this mess. With Labour taking reforms kind of rhetoric on it, it's because they're desperate to keep the red wall, and that kind of voter which doesn't like immigration, doesn't like change. Like, they were talking about the EU's proposal for youth mobility. And so one of the people they got quotes from was saying, oh, you know, I don't want this because it's going to increase immigration. It's like, the temporary visas, lad. Like, what's your issue? Like, they're going to go back eventually, like probably in a couple of years. And with the refugee stuff, like, you're seeing like a whole swathe of people who want to go back to Syria because the civil war is over. And maybe if we stopped arming dictators and stopped pushing civil, you know, wars onto other countries, there wouldn't be so many refugees in the first place. The fact that we sold Gaddafi snipers before the end of his regime is just crazy to me, because all you're doing is prolonging a war, creating more refugees. And that's it, really. Like, I saw, just kind of side note on this, Ed Miliband getting panned because he didn't want to deal with Assad at the time. It's like, you would have turned Syria into Libya. At least now, you know, luckily Syria has a slight chance. If we went in there with no plan, it would have been just like Libya, the exact same, another refugee crisis. And so with Labour kind of taking this rhetoric, it's sad. You know, when you had Starmer talking about, we're going to uphold, you know, migrant rights and refugee rights and stuff like that during the leadership contest, and now suddenly he goes, no, I'm better than Nigel. It's I'm not surprised, in all honesty. I'm not that surprised. I do find it sad that, you know, all of the, and this is the point that I keep making on my channel, all of the people who helped push Starmer into power and called people like us Tory enablers and stuff, Where are you? Like, I don't see you guys anywhere talking about this stuff. All you've done is jumped on how bad Reform UK are, when the thing that stops Reform UK winning power is a Labour government that actually is going to deal with societal problems.
And
they're not doing it.
Yeah, and like taking Reform's arguments to task, right? Winning people over in this situation is not going to be about going, well, Reform are kind of they're right about everything to do with immigration. You know, high immigration is bad, and we don't need immigrants and all that stuff. Like they're right about all of that, but please vote for Labour anyway. It's like that's not going to work, right? We need immigrants to this country because we have a falling birth rate. We're going to have a crisis of we've already got a crisis of care, really, but we're going to have a crisis of staffing and manpower for our care right now, and we need to be able to respond effectively. And at the moment, we just can't. We in terms of demographics, we need immigration. In terms of the economy, we need immigration. In terms of like immigrants' contributions to the economy, they are net contributors. Like if you look at static studies rather than dynamic studies, it deceptively, because it's only looking at a set period of time, makes you think that they are a net drain. But if you look over their whole lifetimes, immigrants are net contributors to the economy. Right? They put in more in tax than they take out in benefits and services. The people crossing the channel, they're not illegals, quote unquote, because under Article 31 of the 1951 Refugee Convention, your method of entry becomes retrospectively legal when you apply for asylum. These are all arguments that Labour could be making, but they're not. They're letting the Tories and Reform have the ground for the next 10 years coming up to the election. I can't understand it personally. I do see your argument about the red wall, but
there are a core of English people who are racist, who see it as, if we let more people in, it takes from what I have. And there is that problem in England where that's one of the reasons why the Conservatives kept winning. It's because I just want myself and my family to be safe. I don't care about anyone else. The fact that we have so many NIMBYs in this country does tell you a lot about it, where they don't want to build more houses because it will lower their own house value. And it's like, okay, geez, where do you want people to live? Or not here. One of the things I did want to say is I think Labour are pushing this stuff on immigration because they can't run on the economy. They can't run. They have no real successes to speak of. I think even the workers' rights bill, I think that's taken a while to get done. There's nothing for them to run on. The economy shrank in October. The only thing they have is immigration. They basically speed ran the last decade of the Tories, which is, we're going to deal with immigration. It's like, okay, but you haven't. And so, Starmer talking about record immigration, net immigration being too high, and then everyone asks him, well, what's a good number for it? He's like, I don't want to say that. And he's like, you look stupid. You look so stupid, because if you're saying this number is too high, what is a good number? But he can't set a target, because if he does, he's not going to grow the economy. That's it. Labour have set themselves in such a paradox where they kept saying they're going to lower immigration. It's like, okay, how are you going to do that? We're just going to let less people in. Okay, how are you going to grow the economy? We had Labour said they're going to build 1.5 million houses. We don't have the people to do it. It's like you can go on a big push to push people into trade school. That's going to take them probably about 3 years. I think it's probably about 3 years to finish an apprenticeship, like a basic one. So that gives you 3 years. You're in 3 years into your term, right? So you hit into year 3, 4. How are you going to build 1.5 million houses in the space of that, or say 700,000? It's ridiculous. Honestly, these guys are the biggest clowns I've ever seen. Like, Rachel Sharby put out a tweet saying the adults are back in charge, but what do they actually want? And they had no idea. They put Morgan McSweeney in there because he's good at fighting the left. It's like, if all you're going to do is culture wars against your own party, your party will disintegrate. There's a reason why the Conservative Party disintegrated, is because you had the ERG and the right-wingers really against the One Nation Tories. And what you're going to see is the same thing, I think, in the Labour Party. We've seen it over the last kind of Starmer's, not even Starmer's period, we've seen it under arguably Ed Miliband, I think, where it was really kind of kicking off. And it's still going. The people who would rather businesses are just, or kind of the idea that businesses can run it, they just need safeguards, versus the ones that say, no, the government should run these services. That's the real problem. And sort of like, even the way people define things, the difference between centre left and people who are left wing, I would argue the people who are left wing are the ones who want more government control over certain things like infrastructure, whereas people on the centre left would rather have private industries run it with some safeguards in place. That I would say is the major difference between the two. And we're seeing like that with the centre left. The fact that Reform outflanking Labour on water, on nationalising Thames Water is crazy, and that's what makes them dangerous, because they play the game differently to the Conservatives. That's their biggest fear, because they will outflank you on certain issues. And so that's the thing Labour don't understand. Like when it comes to the water companies, all right, cool. You can buy the shares at a much lower price. Just do it because it's for the public good, and long term it's much better rather than letting it collapse. We did the same with RBS. It collapsed. We had to buy them out, and then we had shares in a company that made money. There's no reason why Thames Water couldn't make good money, even if it was controlled by the public. If you wanted to run it like that, and you could give some money to the shareholders or whatever, and some of that money goes back to the taxpayer, I wouldn't be against that model. Other countries follow it where the government has the overall share and then private companies have small shares in it, and private companies will make money off the dividends, or investors will make money off the dividends, and so does the government. I have no issue with that.
I really like your analogy of drawing on the Conservatives' experience with the culture war and trying to like suppress populism with sort of the centre of the Conservative Party being essentially usurped by populists, because of course it was Boris Johnson that got them their biggest majority of late, and he was willing to kind of like actually put some investment in. He wasn't like stuck to he wasn't stuck to the old, or at least he was willing to say he was going to do that. Whether or not he followed through on that is a different question, but he was willing to say that he was going to do that. And there's a big parallel again with Donald Trump in the United States, right? He said he was going to address gas prices, and he made it his big thing, like, oh, well, I'm going to address gas prices. And what were the Democrats doing at the time? The Democrats were going, oh, well, we'll be tough on immigration. We'll come together with the Republicans. I'm going to do a stand with Liz Cheney, and we'll come together with the Republicans to do a bipartisan bill on immigration that basically gives the Republicans everything they want. You concede to the right, and what happens? Did it work out well for the Democrats? Not fucking really. Like, I really think that there's lessons to be learned here from the analogy that you brought up, but also the analogy from across the pond, from the United States. Like, there's a lot they could learn from
centrism. It doesn't work because people who want more right-wing governments, they'll vote for the full option, the full sugar option, not the diet option. We've literally seen Olaf Scholz's government has collapsed now. He's gone through a vote of no confidence. There's going to be elections, I think, the 22nd or 24th of February. He kind of pushes that kind of centrism. He's gone. He's effectively voted no confidence. He's done. Biden's administration cooked. I think the same will happen to Keir Starmer. I think he's going to get eaten away by the Lib Dems and the Green Party on the left, and he's going to get eaten away by Reform and the Tories on the right, because he has no real ideology, I'd guess. He doesn't know what he's doing. You had Andy Burnham talking about how Yvette Cooper's one of the best politicians of our era, and I'm like, fuck me, I don't want to see the bad ones, even though we've already seen the bad ones because we cover this stuff. But it's like, Jesus Christ, man, like, it is the biggest lack of talent in any kind of parliament I have ever seen. Like, there's no one in there that inspires any kind of hope at all. Like, honestly, it's just, I think we should call a reset. Everyone who's elected now can't be elected again, and just get a new group of people in, because it's abysmal. Like, when you hear them speak, the arguments they come out with, the ideas they have, especially like West Streeting, and you just like, mate, just give it a rest. The fact that he was clowning on Louise Hay was hilarious at one of those events recently, saying, I'll call you on one of your phones, and it's like, bro, that's a colleague. Like, that's literally a person who was in cabinet with you, and like, what are you doing? Like, I mean,
you need to understand what era we're living in, right? We're not living in the era of aesthetic of we're not living in the era of institution. We're living in the era of populism. We're living in the era of vibe. We're living in the era of aesthetic. Excuse me. We're not living in the era of did I say? Yeah, we are living in the era of aesthetic, not of substance. Yeah, the substance. I meant to say substance the first time. Excuse me. We're not living in the era of institutions and substance. We're living in the era of aesthetics and vibes, and that is the important thing to like bear in mind, right? This era is one where we need politicians fit for that era. We need charismatic politicians. We need leaders on the left who are willing to actually make the arguments, instead of assuming that adopting your opponent's positions is the same thing as making an argument.
That's the easier thing to do, and you just kind of steal their arguments and say, we'd do better, and that's pretty much it. Like, Boris Johnson, I'd do Brexit better, stuff like that. Hey, Max is here. But I think for me personally, I think we are in the vibes era. You're all right. is about how you appear and things like that. But it's also about how people feel as well day to day. Like, you know, when people talk about the economy, it's about like, you know, has costs gone up for me? You know, when people talk about inflation coming down, it's like, I'm still paying a ridiculous amount for milk, mate. Like, so I'm not feeling the prices, you know, the price is coming down or whatever. And even then, when they say inflation's coming down, it's just the rate is not going as high or as aggressively as it was, which is always going to happen. So yeah, I think if Labour can deal with the economy and the cost of living stuff, it should be okay for the most part. But, you know, aside from raising minimum wage, I don't see a lot else that they're doing. Keeping the tax bans in place, you know, the bottom end one, you know, I guess they didn't have a ton of choices, but I think they had much better options at that budget, and it's a huge problem. All of that schmoozing to big business, and you screwed it already. It's just such a funny thing to do. Like, less than a year in, and Kemi Badenoch's already there, the CBI, saying, "Well, you know, guys, I'm always an option." It's like, no, please, not you.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. But we should probably wrap up because that's about all we have time for today. Thank you to everyone who tuned in, and thank you, Marge, for joining me. Honestly, your insights have been really good, as I expected. Your insights have been amazing. We'll be live as usual for our show on Thursday. Remember the new schedule. It'll be Thursday evening. It'll be sometime after 7:30. Apologies for the late start once again. We're in a time of political instability across the world, so we appreciate your support. And again, please do give us a follow on Blue Sky. You can just search for Turn Left Media. And with that, I hope you all have a wonderful evening. Good night.
Support social justice that's there on social media. Thank you. Turn Left.